for this upcoming weekend to see a familiar face, and that's Andy Reid, and they're going to see him in Kansas City in a tough place to play in Arrowhead. So now joining us on the hotline, Garry Cobb, former Eagle of gcobb.com, and he's kind enough to hop on board with us right now. G-Cobb, appreciate a few minutes. Thanks for the time, and how are you?
I'm doing great. I mean, that was a great win there yesterday, and you know it seemed like they were going to outplay them and didn't let that game slip away. But they found a way to come up with it, and you got to give a lot of different parts of the team a lot of credit for it. But it was a big win.
And because it's a big win, we'll save the critical stuff for the later part of this interview. But Doug Peterson yesterday, he gets the Gatorade bath. Usually you don't see a Gatorade bath after the first game, but the players, with everything that's been said about Doug Peterson from Mike Lombardi, and then the article about how maybe Jim Schwartz is walking around like he is the head coach, looks like the players were fighting for their head coach yesterday, and it meant a lot to get that victory for him.
Well, definitely. They, as he said, they read the papers. Well, really, they read online because nobody reads papers anymore. But anyway, they heard about it and they wanted to make a statement, and they felt good about winning the game, and they liked Doug, and there's no question about the fact that they like him. He's a player's coach, so they like him. There are pluses to that. Not everything is a plus with being a player's coach, but he is definitely a player's coach. They won the game, and everybody feels good about that. But I think they like him as a coach. There's no question about that. The thing you want, though, is you don't necessarily – the number one thing is not to have your players like you. The number one thing is to get production. And so they got production yesterday, so you got to give Doug a thumbs up because they did find a way to win the game.
Taking it a step further, because fans and analysts are always going to nitpick things and say, oh, Doug could have done this better, like a 3rd-and-1 run with LeGarrette Blount out of shotgun. I didn't love the play call to Aguilar, which resulted in a fumble. But overall, they get a win. That's the most important thing. When you look at it from a positive and negative aspect, how would you, in the total scheme of this, evaluate Doug yesterday? What were some things you liked? What were some things that you thought he could have been better at?
Well, first thing is, he had a motivated team. I thought the game came down to the fact that the Eagles wanted that game more than the Redskins. And that's a big part of your job as a head coach. So I give him a plus there in that his team was more motivated than the team they were facing. The other thing I would look at is I wasn't crazy about his play calling. I thought that, he's putting too much on Carson Wentz. They came out and they wanted to throw the ball early. I can understand some of that, but I think running the ball is I think more effective than just throwing the ball. But the problem is that they really didn't get into a rhythm, throwing the ball or running the ball. They never got into a rhythm, and the big thing that happened that really got them over the top was just Carson Wentz making a play because of his size, his athleticism, that they were ready to sack him, and they wound up letting him get away, and that's when he made the big throw to Nelson Aguilar, and, of course, that's what gave the Eagles the lead. That was a major function of Carson, just the player that he's capable of being and everything. So I can't give Doug a big thing on that. But, the big thing I would say is that first point I made, that you had a motivated team. I think both sides of the ball, they gave more effort than the Redskins. I mean, you look at defensive lines, the way they played, I'm going to give Doug a plus on that. But like I said, because they had a motivated team. They played emotionally. You can't play football unemotionally. That's not when you play your best game. It's when, this means something to you, and so you're just giving that emotional effort. So I'll give them a plus there. But when I look at the offensive rhythm and everything.
Offensive line has to be better, G. The offensive line was terrible yesterday. It's just offensive line. They got to improve.
I agree. I think they would make their job easier, though, if you're always saying, okay, we want to run the ball, okay? Mm-hmm. And see, but that's not what Doug says. Doug is in the mentality of the West Coast offense. Yeah. Then the West Coast offense, the way it was developed was you had a guy, Bill Walsh, who was up at Stanford, He's looking for offense. And I happen to be, I went through USC, but USC will always beat Stanford. Better athletes. Well, he wanted to be able to dink and dunk with the short passing game because he couldn't run the football. But I don't think the Eagles should just settle and say, well, we can't run the football. Why did we get these 300-pound monsters up front? We're running the ball on you. So we want to try to run the ball. So I would like him to commit to that more because I think it takes pressure off of Carson Wentz. But we get into the whole thing about, Wendell Smallwood has got to be the guy that runs the ball most because LeGarrett's big. He is a pounding back. But unless you're going to give him the ball a lot, he's not going to get into a rhythm. He's the kind of guy that wears down a defense. I don't think they're ever going to run the ball enough to let him really wear down the defense. So, I just see a quandary there with how they're going to get. But I would just like them to think about trying to run the ball more because it takes pressure off of Carson. Because we don't want him throwing the ball 40 and 50 times. That's when I think you throw the ball too much. Then he's going to make a mistake. And we saw that yesterday. He made that mistake. Boom. All of a sudden, Redskins are back into it. So I would like to see them try to run the ball more and be more committed to it. But really, to be honest with you, I don't think Doug's ever going to be like that.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, I think you're right. I think he's going to go down with what he's trying to do and what he's been trying to do for a while. But they do got to run the ball. As we're talking to Garry Cobb right now, gcobb.com.
Let me just throw one other thing in. Is the problem with, all the timing on the throws, the short throws with the timing and everything. Doggone it, you should have played them more in the preseason if you want to emphasize that because guys have to work together a lot. You see that the timing was off.
Yeah, but that offensive line, in the preseason wasn't doing Wentz any favors. So I'm all about protecting the quarterback.
I'll agree with you. We can circle the offensive line as the biggest negative. Okay.
It's the biggest negative right now. But you talk about Wendell Smallwood. How much of a liability is he right now because of his lack of pass blocking abilities? When he's been the running back position and he's trying to make some blocking and it just hasn't been good right now for him.
Well, it's a problem. It's definitely a problem. Him staying healthy, him blocking on the pass blocking. It's definitely been a problem, and the big thing about it is, like I said, LeGarrette Blount is not an every down back. He's not the receiver that the Eagles want coming out of the backfield. So you got him, you got of course you got Sproles, who you don't want to run too much. You don't want to wear him out by giving the ball 20 times or 25 times. You can't do that because the guy's too old to be doing that. And he's too small. So we're kind of in a quandary with this running back situation, and I'm not thrilled about any of the situation with the Blunt, Sproles, Smallwood. So we're going to have to tell Smallwood, man, you got to grow up fast, and because we're going to put you in there, we're going to let you run the ball, and you got to pick up the blitz. So I just see a problem going forward there because I don't see a great setup there where you got people in there that you're really crazy about because really you're going to wind up using Sproles more than you want to.
Let's get to the wide receivers. Aguilar, and I'll throw Ertz in there. I know he's a tight end, but they use him so much in the slot. Ertz yesterday I thought was really good. And Aguilar, hey, I've been on Aguilar, and I've been a big critic of Aguilar, but he showed up yesterday. We'll see if he can replicate it next week, but a nice performance to start off the season for Nelson Aguilar.
No doubt about it. Now, I tell you, he's been looking great in the practices. The kid has worked hard, and, times I've talked to him and tell him, hey, look, man, you can play like that out here. Just go play. Don't be thinking, about what people are saying and get distracted by all that.
He seems more mature, G. He seems more mature this year.
Yeah, I would agree, and he just needs to stay where he's at. The kid has ability. He's shown, like I said, he can do it. He just needs to stay focused, and I think we could have a big year out of him, and we need it. We need him to have a big year because, really, he's played with Carson more than any of the other guys. So hopefully we get a big year out of him. We almost saw some things yesterday with Alshon Jeffrey. We see the capabilities. He can make the big catch. But hopefully it gets going soon enough so that we know it doesn't cost us some games while these guys are getting used to playing with each other. But we definitely need him to make some big plays, which he's capable of because of his size and his length and everything. So hopefully we see that. And then really, Carson missed Torrey Smith. I mean, he had his guy beaten deep, and really Carson missed a couple of them with the deep throws. As I said, the guys didn't play with each other that much during the preseason, and really they're just kind of getting used to each other. It didn't cost us the game, so we're okay. But see, if it starts costing us games, then we're going to hold that against Doug because he's the one who didn't play these guys.
Now, let me ask you this, because I was doing the Fanatic post-game show last night, and we had on Chris Cooley, and I asked him, because we saw that the Eagles were a little rusty, the Redskins were a little rusty with their offensive attack, and I said, when you bring in new pieces, how long does it take you to get that chemistry? And Chris said about 3 or 4 regular season games. So when you had new players, I know you're a defensive player, different side of the ball, but when you get new players, how long does it take to build that chemistry?
It takes a few games. It takes working in practice, but you need to get in the game because the energy is hyped up, and you really get more of a sense of what really happens during a game. Things speed up a bit. So you need regular season games to be able to get a feel for each other. So it's going to take a few games for those guys to really be confident that everybody knows exactly what the other is doing. And remember, you still have a young quarterback in Carson Wentz there who's still finding his way. So it's going to take some time. I just hope they get into their stride so it doesn't cost them games. And that's where the defense, the defense rescued things yesterday. And, they're paying these guys a lot of money that front. And they showed up and really they took over the game. And they really took Kirk Cousins out of his game because they pounded Kirk Cousins. There were a couple shots he took. I know one by Jernigan. Jernigan hit him.
Oh, big shot.
It was like a body blow in a fighting match. And a quarterback, that affects that quarterback the rest of the game when you hit somebody that hard.
You get in his head. He remembers that shot. He remembers that hit. I'll tell you, that defensive line looks like they've been playing together 100 games, G. It's a complete antithesis of the offense.
Well, the thing is, they have been, they've been playing with that energy and practice and things. And, and defense is different. It doesn't take as long defensively.
Sure.
Because you just got guys turning it up. And it's not so much as the timing and things. We want mayhem on defense, And I think that they have gotten into some of that.
All right, replacing Darby, because we know he's going to be out for a few weeks now, according to Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network. And I guess you take 4 to 6 weeks because when you first saw it, you probably thought, he's done for the season. How do they go about replacing Ronald Darby?
Well, it's going to take a couple of guys. Yesterday, they were able to put Patrick Robinson in there, and he did a pretty good job. But they're going to have to decide on who they want to put out there. Jalen Watkins went in. He did a good job. So I think they're probably going to go with him because they like Patrick Robinson in there in that slot, playing the slot corner. So I think they're going to keep Robinson in there as a slot corner, go with Jalen Watkins outside, and that's what they're going to do until Ronald Darby gets back. And they're going to miss Darby because he's the fastest of their corners. He's the guy that really they can allow to be over there without any help because he's fast enough to go with anybody that wants to go deep. The other guys are somewhat, speed challenged, but I think they like Watkins. He's got good size, and he's got good speed, too. Not quite as fast as Darby, but he's got good speed. So I think they probably like him at the corner. So I expect to see Jalen Watkins and Jalen Mills on the other. Jalen Mills had a good game, of course, with the interception and things. But you'll see Jalen Watkins on one side, Jalen Mills on the other, and when they go nickel, you'll see Patrick Robinson come in there in the slot corner.
Now, get into Jim Schwartz, because everyone's been imploring for him to blitz, and you could see early on in that game that they were coming. How about the job Schwartz did yesterday? We got to give him some credit.
I give Schwartz a lot of credit. He did dial up some blitzes when he needed to. But see, the fact they had put so much pressure on Kirk Cousins without the blitz, they really imposed their will on them, and they really took him out of his game. And that's the one thing you can do with Kirk Cousins. You got to get him off his spot. If he's able to just stand there and throw, and he's not being hit, he's not being touched, he's a much better quarterback. He's one of the better quarterbacks in the league when he can do that. But if you hit him, move him off that spot, then he drops. He really just kind of falls apart, as we saw yesterday, because that interception down by the goal line, if he throws that ball on target, Eagles might not win that game, simple as that.
Did you believe the play at the end of the game where Brandon Graham comes in and Fletcher Cox ends up with the big boy touchdown? I thought that was an incomplete pass, and the refs, they didn't overturn it. What did you make of that review?
Yeah, it was an incomplete pass. It was a gift. You know, you don't turn down
You take
gifts.
those, though.
You better believe you take them, because sometimes they take some away from you, which are bad calls. So, you know, you live with what you got. And they got a gift on that one. But I will give them credit that they had the pressure on him, and the fact that they were in there and it was very close. That's why they got it, because it was a close call. But clearly the ball was going forward. He had thrown it. It was should have been an incomplete pass. It was a bad call. And those refs are going to get hit with that up at the league office, because they grade them, and they're going to say that's a minus. You guys missed this call.
G. Cobb, before we let you run, how much of a chance do you give this team up against the Kansas City Chiefs for this Week 2 game?
Well, you know, they're definitely going to be an underdog. They'll probably be underdog, maybe even by 7 points. You know, the big thing is they cannot afford to turn the ball over there. You know, that's a raucous crowd. It's going to be very loud. And Carson can't take the chances he did, against Washington, because they got so many good athletes that will be rushing the passer that if he gets to floating around like he did on that touchdown with Nelson Aguilar, chances are somebody's going to come up behind him and knock that ball loose. So I would tell him he just needs to take what's there. And this is where Doug, I was almost ready to say Andy. This is where
Hey, in this game you could be saying Andy and Doug. You'll see a lot of timeouts in this one.
Well, both of them like to throw the ball too much. But anyway, I want to see Doug establish a running game, because that's going to protect his quarterback. If he just throws the ball too much, they got so many playmakers that you're going to wind up with turnovers, and that'll kill the Eagles. So I want to see them establish a running game in the game against Kansas City. You
know, these next 2 weeks, you're going up against two really good defenses in the Chiefs and the Giants. This offensive line, do you have confidence that they could bounce back? Because if this offensive line doesn't bounce back, quarterback and running backs are going to be struggling the next 2 weeks.
Well, you know, I think they're capable of playing better than they did, and they must play better than they did. And that's why I would run the football, because I don't want to put Carson in a bad situation. See, because you don't want him getting hammered, you don't want him getting hit real hard, and you don't want him getting where things get negative, where he's turning the ball over and everything, because he can lose his confidence, and you don't want that to happen. So I want to see them come out, try to run the football, really commit to trying to run the football, and keep him out of those third and longs, because he was in a lot of third and longs. I think his average was like 3rd and 9. You can't ask your young quarterback to be in that situation all the time. So try to establish a running game, and let's be smart, because we got to take care of the football. We're going to take some chances, but we're not going to get crazy. We're going to make sure we take care of the football. That's the big thing, because if they do that, then they give themselves a chance where you got a close game in the fourth quarter, and then you try to pull it out.
Dead on. G. Cobb, Garry Cobb, gcobb.com. Before we let you run, because I just love hearing you talk about football. I could listen to you talk football all day. Can you give me a good Reggie White story before we let you run?
Oh, man, Reggie White. Well, you know, the big thing about Reggie was, you know, he was a guy who you're talking about, he's like 305 pounds, 6'5". Well, one day at practice, he challenged all the running backs. They wanted to race him in a 40-yard dash. They put all these guys up here, you know. Reggie outruns every one of them.
Wow.
In a 40-yard dash at 305 pounds. And that's why, you got a guy that's in the Hall of Fame and one of the best to ever play the game.
Could you beat him in a race?
It was close. It was close.
Is that a yes or no?
He might be able to edge me. It's tight, be back and forth. But I've never raced him. I ran about, I've run, 4.5, 8, 4.5, 6. I mean, so I run that, and that's where he is. So it's close.
Gee, we appreciate it. Let's do it again soon. gcobb.com, the great Garry Cobb. We appreciate it, Garry.
All right. Thanks a lot.